Okay, ready? All right. So on this female model, you guys, first of all, we can see the ovary here as a sort of bright yellow structure. It's kind of colored like adipose, like on our models, but this one's the ovary. Okay, in this model, that's the ovary. And the ovary is going to be suspended within the peritoneal cavity by some suspensory ligaments. So that's the ovary there. Now the suspensory ligaments help support the structure of like the ovarian tube or fallopian tube, as well as the uterus. Now, in white here, all of that tissue in white, that's called the broad ligament. Okay, that's the broad ligament. All that sort of white tissue. It's kind of like a big wing of tissue. That's the broad ligament. It's going to kind of help support the ovary and the fallopian tube, kind of keep it suspended. Okay. Now, we have another ligament nearby. That's called the ovarian ligament, which is this one right here. I'll kind of rotate you guys. That's the ovarian ligament. And what this ligament does, it helps anchor the ovary to the uterus. That's the ovarian ligament. Helps anchor the ovary to the uterus. It's kind of hard to point until, darn it, you missed it. Right there. That's the ovarian ligament. Okay. It's pretty straightforward. It's the only thing that's connecting the ovary to the uterus. You know what I mean? And one thing that you could get confused by would be the difference between the ovarian ligament from the fallopian tube. So when you first look at this, we want to look for then is if you see this little thing that's over by the ovary, you want to rule out ovarian ligament from fallopian tube. So the one thing that you can identify with the fallopian tube, you guys, is it kind of enlarges around the ovary, and it has a little fimbriae there, which are like little finger-like projections that kind of surround the ovary. Almost like if you think about like somebody's hand like on a basketball, kind of cupping that basketball. But what's interesting about the fimbriae is they don't actually touch that basketball. They don't touch the ovary. They just kind of are nearby. So that's the fimbriae there. That's when we can tell the difference between the ovarian ligament and the fallopian tube. Okay. Now, we have to list out. So now the fallopian tube there is going to connect to the uterus. So here's the uterus. And the uterus has a couple different regions we can identify here. We have the fundus, which is this top curvature here. Okay. We have the body, which is just the main part. And we have the cervix down here, which is over here by the neck. Okay. In fact, cervix means neck. Now the cervix is what separates the uterus from the vagina itself. So here's the vaginal canal. Okay. And females also have a pelvic diaphragm, just like males. So it'd be a lot of muscle in this particular area to support the pelvic cavity. There's better models for the pelvic diaphragm. Basically, if you just see a lot of muscle on the inferior part of the pelvis, that's pelvic diaphragm. But it includes a lot of different muscles. Now, we can also see some of the external anatomy on here, which this one's not the best for this, but I'll kind of show you guys from this one side. Okay, so labia majora is this larger one here, kind of like the larger lip. And that one's made of stratified squamous epithelium with hair. You can tell that somebody's trying really hard not to laugh. So this is the labia majora. Okay, it's just like stratified. It's analogous to the scrotum. That's what kind of tissue it's like. Okay, so that's labia majora. Just medial to that, we'll have labia minora, which is right here. Nuts. It's M-I-N-O-R-A. Minora, right? Because when I said menorah, it kind of sounded like, you know, like a menorah. But I don't mean that. It's minor. Labia minor. I'm never going to forget that now. Labia minora. All right. And then right here, you guys, look closely. That's the clitoris, right there. Okay, so right here. Right there. That's the clitoris. Okay. So that's made of erectile tissue. In fact, the clitoris is erectile tissue just like corpus spongiosum. In fact, they're both made of corpus spongiosum. So right there's the clitoris. I think we can also see on here, you know, like we can see the bladder, right? So the bladder is more anterior than the uterus, and the bladder is going to have your little urethra coming down, okay? And then posterior over here, this is the rectum, and then anus. So you have the rectum, vagina, urethra in that particular order. So you can see it out in this model. And that's it for the female structures, so it's not too bad.